Okay, now we're in Southern Africa, and we're going to talk about the Zambezi, right? This source is A History of the Colonization of Africa by Alien Races by Harry Johnston, right? 1899, page 176. Nowadays, the Indian population of Natal has risen to something like 42,000, right? We come on down, right? And we see that they're, talking about the people. Come down right here, we see here and there they have mingled with the Kaffirs, producing a rather fine-looking hybrid similar in appearance to the Black Portuguese. So whoever this mixture is right here looks similar to the Black Portuguese, right? And it says the Black Portuguese on the Zambezi, that's in Africa, right? Who are descendant from a cross between natives of Goa in Portuguese India and Zambezi Negroes. So we see the Black Portuguese right here most certainly reflects a result of mixing between the natives of Goa in Portuguese India and the Zambezi Negroes. So the Africans in the Zambezi region, Southern Africa, they mix with the Goanese, so the natives of Goa, and they create the Black Portuguese. And they're saying this other group, right, that mingled with the Kaffirs produced a rather fine-looking hybrid similar in appearance to the Black Portuguese on the Zambezi. And they described the Zambezi Black Portuguese. They say they are descendants from a cross between natives of Goa in Portuguese India and Zambezi Negroes. I know I over-explain that, but I want to make that really a point in all the information that I'm bringing out regarding the Black Portuguese being the result of mixture, right? So let's keep going. We got this source here, report of the 6th International Geographical Congress. This is from 1896. This is about the 1895, Congress held in London. Page 533, right? The example of the degenerate Chotara Indian half-caste of Zanzibar and of the Black Portuguese half-caste who have now become the worst slave raiders of South Central Africa should be sufficient to deter us from any similar experiment. So now they're talking about half-caste and all of that stuff. They talk about the Indian half-caste of Zanzibar and the Black Portuguese half-caste, and they said that these in particular, the Black Portuguese half-caste, who have now become the worst slave raiders of South Central Africa. These people are selling slaves, the descendants of Portuguese men and African women, right? And those are the Black Portuguese, they're half-caste. Another source, Manchester Geographical Society, 1895, page 179, right? It says the slave trade is still carried on by the Black Portuguese, the Arabs, and several of the other native tribes, right? The Yaos more especially. So this source just interestingly backs the previous source speaking on the Black Portuguese, right? They were slave traders. That's very interesting, right? Because some people make the case that the descendants of the Jews, even though these are just the descendants of likely just regular Portuguese, they say that those people got sold into slavery. But this source shows that the ones who are mixing in Africa oftentimes are indulging in the slave trading, right? There's a source right here, the British Veterinary Journal, right, 1894, page 425. It says, speaking of the devastation and ruin brought about by the Arab slave dealers, he says, the depopulation caused by the frequent ravages of the Black Portuguese and the Arabs or Arab-Negro alliances reduced the considerable tracts of the country to a state of wilderness. So we hear about them being mixed, we hear about them selling slaves, right? Here's another source, the Quarterly Register, page 108, right? Y'all can look these sources up. It says, immense tracts of fertile plateau lands are still uninhabited or very sparsely occupied, having been depopulated by the slave raids of the Arabs or the Black Portuguese from the Zambezi, right? So hopefully we can get a little bit deeper about these Zambezi Black Portuguese. They seem to be a chaotic bunch, wouldn't you say? So this source is by Robert Brown, 1892, right? The Story of Africa and Its Explorers, Volume 4, pages 32 to 33. All right, we're going to start further down on page 32. It says, in the valley of the Zambezi, especially between Tete and Sena, also to a lesser extent between Tete and Zumbo, are a separate caste of people. In parentheses it says, the Black Portuguese, and it has a foot, like kind of a foot mark right there, footnote. Look like a cross, right? We'll get to that. It says the Black Portuguese, right? A separate caste of people, Black Portuguese. The offspring originally of Portuguese or Goanese fathers and Negro mothers, so non-black men and black women, but who in latter days by constant interbreeding with the local races have become, to all intents and purposes, Negroes with longer hair. Has another footnote, right? So if we look right here where it says the Black Portuguese, and it has this little cross-looking mark, we go down right here with the cross-looking mark, right? The Black Portuguese. It says, called by the natives Azungu, or white men, in remembrance, no doubt, of their progenitors, right? That's interesting. It says, together with the Portuguese name, usually a very high-sounding one, these half-castes generally own a native appellation that is often more descriptive and to the point than the string of Portuguese patronymies by which they call themselves, right? So we keep going, right? For all intents and purposes, they're Negroes with longer hair, Portuguese names, and the habit of wearing European costumes. These people have long been a curse to the Zambezi countries and a serious obstacle to the extension of settled definitive rule of the part of Portugal. In bygone centuries, to encourage immigration and settlement in these regions, the Portuguese government would adopt as its wards the daughter of chiefs who it had dispossessed and make them great heiresses in land. Then any Portuguese who chose to marry these ladies of color entered into the possession of their vast estates and many slaves, and as not a few enterprising soldiers of fortune established themselves thus in Zambezia. So it looks like the Portuguese got in good with black African women, right? Again, in Africa. So we see the people of Zambezi, they're described in other sources as slave traders. They're kind of chaotic, right? And they're called, quote unquote, Azungu, or white men, in remembrance of their progenitors, right? So this is who they are. These are right here, the Black Portuguese, right? The Black Portuguese are the Zambezi, and they are the mixed descendants, right? So we're seeing more and more evidence. So we're seeing it with the Jews. We're seeing it with just regular Portuguese in India. We see it here with just regular Portuguese in Africa, right? So let's go right here, page 33 of the source. It's finished, right? So it says, soldiers of fortune established themselves in Zambezia, right? So there sprang up this aristocracy of half-caste who have proved themselves capable of more deliberate wickedness than could be laid to the charge of either their black or their white forefathers, right? That's very interesting. So now we're going to go to Indonesia. Wow, the Portuguese go into parts of Asia and do the same thing, right? So I want to show this group of people. Over here in Indonesia, you have the Atoni, right? And I got this. This is just a simple Wikipedia peruse of these people. You just go and just look them up, or look up the ethnic groups of Timor, right, in Indonesia. They are ethnic group on Timor, right? They number about 844,000. They have their own language. This is one of the indigenous groups in Indonesia that met the Portuguese, right? And if you go to minorityrights.org, you can look at some of these people just to get an idea of what kind of people they are, because they certainly are dark indigenous people, right? You see the features, the skin color, but you also see the hair texture on some of them. So what I wanted to highlight is that when it talks about the ethnic groups, in Indonesia or whatever, or in this region, it says the indigenous people are of Austronesian origin. So if anybody is familiar with the Austronesian people, many of them definitely are quote unquote black or dark. Some people confuse them with us Africans, right? Or descendants of Africans, right? But their paternal lineages are totally different. They are not E-carriers like the majority of Africans and African Americans. They, I believe they would have Southeast Asian or sort of like Asian haplogroups. Don't quote me, but stuff like maybe haplogroup C, maybe haplogroup O, or D. I would assume either maybe O. You know, if you go look up the Y DNA markers of Austronesian people and Melanesian Papuan kind of people, you'll get the idea of, you know, who these people are that were mixing with the Portuguese, right? But these are not the ancestors of African Americans. So this is a separate group of people of color, just like the Indians are. Right? So here's a source: the Portuguese and Luso-Asian legacies in Southeast Asia, right? And it talks about the Larantuqueros in Indonesia, originally called Topases, and the Black Portuguese. Oh, so these people are called the Black Portuguese as well, right? Has nothing to do with Africa again this time. Has to do with the Portuguese and darker indigenous people, right? So the Larantuqueros, and I'm probably butchering this, Larantuqueros of Larantuca, right, are the descendants of the original Portuguese who settled there in the early 1500s and intermarried with the local Malay and Papuan women, together with later Portuguese groups who were expelled from Malacca and Makassar in 1641 and 1660 respectively. So now again, these populations that they're mixing with aren't even Africans. These are these are Southeast Asian people of color, and their descendants are still being called the Black Portuguese or Larantuqueros. Another source, Portuguese Empire by A.J.R. Russellwood in 2020, page 74, right? We got the Black Portuguese or Larantuqueros, right? So we keep seeing that name Black Portuguese pop up. It's another source by Emmanuel Brunet Jaley, right? Page 178 in this book here, right? Border disputes, right? Right here, it says a product of mixed Portuguese, Chinese, Dutch, and native liaisons. They were known as Black Portuguese, Topases, or Larantuqueros. So we keep seeing mixture of Portuguese with indigenous people resulting in Black Portuguese, right? So it's definitely a connection between being called Black Portuguese, having that nomenclature, and being mixed, right? In particular. Here's a source, Hobson Johnson, being a glossary of Anglo-Indian colloquial words. This is by Sir Henry Yule and Arthur Coke Burnell, 1886, right? And I took the relevant portions from page 711 to 712. This is just showing you the meaning of these words. Now, I know this might be a little fuzzy for y'all, so I'll just read some of these things. Topases, black foot soldiers descended from Portuguese marrying natives, called Topases because they wear hats. Assuredly, the mixture of Mormon, all of this stuff. It says right here, I have also recommended the corpse of Topases or descendants of Europeans who retain the characteristic qualities of their progenitors. Topases, the sons of Europeans and black women, or Low Portuguese who are trained to arms, right? So the black women that they're talking about are Southeast Asian women in Indonesia. These are Papuan, Austronesian, Malay kind of women, right? And they definitely have people of color in that region of the world, right? Right here, Topases, Indo-Portuguese, either the mixed product of Portuguese and Indian parents or converts to the Portuguese, right? So like I said, there's some people who just took on the manners and became Portuguese culturally, and they were calling themselves that. Keep going, Topaz, half-caste, claimants of Portuguese descent, Topases or black mongrel Portuguese, right? Topases or black Portuguese, right? We see all of that, right? Move on to this source. Early modern Southeast Asia, right? 1350 to 1800, right? And it's showing y'all Timor right here in, this whole region of Indonesia, right? Is Timor here, right? says the origins of the black Portuguese in Asia would have begun in the Portuguese enclave of Goa in India, the main center of the Portuguese Asian Empire or Estado da India. They had been the brainchild of Alfonso de Albuquerque, who hoped that the offspring of unions between the Portuguese and women from good local Indian families would in time produce a loyal corps of subjects to staff the empire. So they thought they can mix in and pacify the people, right? That seems to be the Portuguese way. You see Albuquerque, that was his strategy there. Right, and then we just go to Wikipedia. If y'all go to Wikipedia and look up Portuguese Indonesians, and I thought I had it. Let's see. I thought I had it there. You can go to Wikipedia and look up Portuguese Indonesians, right? And you'll see under there they'll have the Black Portuguese right here, right? It says the Black Portuguese as a political entity. They arose with the Portuguese settlement on the small island of Solor, using Solor as a stepping stone to trade in sandalwood on Timor. Talks about the Dutch, and in spite of continuous hostilities with the Dutch, the Topazes, so we know they were called Black Portuguese, they managed to obtain a steady foothold in Timor, and so forth, right? So, and then further in the Wikipedia article, you see the Portuguese took indigenous wives, but they always wrote down Portuguese ancestry. They didn't have a citation here, but I got all the sources right here that y'all can go to see that the people in Timor and Indonesia were called such. So Wikipedia don't have it. Maybe I can go put this in Wikipedia for them. This new population group is called Topazes, but they called themselves Larantuqueros. Dutch called them Zwart Portuguese, Black Portuguese, or Dark Portuguese, right? And you see this fella right here? He would be probably what you would describe as a Black Portuguese in Indonesia, right? His name is Jose Alexandre. I can't pronounce this. Guzmão, right? You see he has this Iberian kind of name. He was born in Manututu, Portuguese Timor, to parents of mixed Portuguese Timorese ancestry, both of whom were school teachers. His parents were assimilados, right? And that's Wikipedia from Zana. His name is Zana Guzmão. And for this right here, you just go to Portuguese Indonesians or Indonesian Portuguese. Type that in and then you'll see it. Reason I'm giving y'all Wikipedia is because it's just some of this stuff is just very simple where all you need is an overview. And of course this section right here doesn't have a citation, but I have the sources. I went and found them on my own. Some of these sources go back to the 19th century and so forth, so some of this stuff is very recent, right? But there you have it as far as the Black Portuguese. So it seems abundantly clear that the Black Portuguese often refers to mixed descendants of Portuguese and foreign women. The same has been demonstrated with the Black Portuguese Jews in Sao Tome and elsewhere in Africa. So in closing, for people who like the author of From Babylon to Timbuktu, when they make the Black Portuguese argument, we have to be more careful in our research and a little bit more nuanced, right? Because he was talking about the Jews from Sao Tome becoming known as the Black Portuguese, right? And here's a source that maybe he was privy to. I'm not sure if he was, but it definitely says that, kind of without the presupposition of them already being black. It basically talks about the Black Portuguese spawning from them. But like we stated, people of Cape Verde had the same exact history of Sao Tome, and those people were called Black Portuguese, literally, in history. So, and they are proven to be a product of mixture. As far as genetics is concerned, they actually have paternal lineages that go back to non-African, Middle Eastern, Sephardic, and other Jewish or Middle Eastern men, basically. And we looked into India, and we just looked at the regular, I believe they were non-Jewish Iberians, Portuguese, who made descendants that were called Black Portuguese. So it seems to be just a Portuguese thing, whether you be a Portuguese or a Portuguese Jew. That was a nomenclature put on people, pretty much based on mixture. And most of these people, being women of color mixing with the Portuguese, their descendants came out perhaps a bit darker than the average Portuguese or whatever, especially in African and Austronesian Papuan type of populations of women, mixing with the Portuguese. So yeah, the evidence definitely leads in that direction. Certainly for the Jews in Sao Tome, and we definitely just went through all the evidence pretty much on that side of the old world with the Portuguese. So I want to thank everybody for watching the video. This was a long time coming, just tracing down all these sources. So I want to say peace and love, and thank you. Bye.